of the above.
The crypto thing just continues to explode. And there was a great article in Zero Hedge by a guy named Sergey Glaziev. Did you happen to read that?
I might have.
He's Russian who was born, I think, in the Ukraine, but he is a serious player. I mean, a serious player. He's a top advisor to the Eurasia Economic Union. Was the top former Russian Academy of Science member, and his article just says that that there's going to be, as a result of these sanctions, there is going to be a sea change in reserve currency. And his position, and it's a hell of an article, he says that because of what's happened already in the sanctions has undermined, as he puts it, the US, EU, and the UK, and the status of the dollar, euro, and pound. And he has already, years ago, had published a paper saying switch to essentially an international global currency, which would be a cryptocurrency.
Well, let's roll with it. I'm game.
Let's roll with it, because I think it's just, the situation continues to unfold with the horrible economic situation in this country. Okay, we'll just go with it, because it's an area you're the expert in, and people are going to be looking for some answers. So let's do it. All right, we ready? Welcome to Joel Nagel's Global Wealth Fortress Report. In this edition, we're going to be talking about some situations confronting every one of you out there watching in terms of the U.S. economy vis-a-vis the reserve dollar, vis-a-vis cryptocurrency, the whole ball of wax. And there's no better expert to discuss it than America's #1 asset protection attorney, Joel Nagel. Joel, how are you?
Hey, Carter, I'm doing great. Coming to you today from the Allegheny Country Club, which is just about 10 miles outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it's one of the oldest golf clubs in the United States. And it's really fascinating to be here. I'm a guest here today, and seeing all of the historic people and tournaments that have been held here, PGA tournaments, and the famous names that are household names. It's really quite fantastic. But I know we want to talk about real world problems, but it's a great backdrop to be contemplating what's going on in the world right now.
Oh, it is a great backdrop, but I have a feeling that if it's half as cold up there in Pittsburgh as it is in York, Pennsylvania right now, you were not out on the links today.
Well, one of the reasons, no, I wasn't, and one of the reasons that I'm in the men's locker room here, it's so empty, is because it's been snowing all day. So here we are towards the end of April, and we're getting a nice snowstorm. So yeah, I think you'd have to be Bill Murray to be out golfing on a day like today.
Yeah, it's pretty bitter. The years ago, very quickly, I think it was 1969, and my dad and brother and I went to the Washington Senators opening day, and it was like it is now, the snowing, the spitting snow and all, and it was so bitter cold that we kept going to the restroom. And so about the fifth inning, my father said, "Fellas, we just have to leave. If I spend any more time in the men's room, I'm going to get arrested." It was just...
Yeah, no, we've had those kind of baseball games here in Pittsburgh for sure.
Yep.
Not as cool, of course, as a Steelers game in the wintertime. I've sat through some negative temperatures there, but looking around at this club, it does make me think in terms of people who've been able to marshal and build their resources and those who haven't. And it really does concern me when we talk about the dollar, because quite frankly, I think the dollar, I don't think it's going to be, zero tomorrow. It's certainly going to have worth going forward, but I think that worth is going to be diminished. And the people who will be able to afford clubs like this going forward are going to be people who have the who are thinking progressively about what they should do to protect their money. We talked last week about what the real inflation rate is. Clearly, it's much, much higher than what the government figures suggest. And, we see now that the dollar, not only is it under attack from printing and inflation, but it's become a tool in the world, economic. It's become it's become militarized.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it used to be that, we fought wars with tanks and guns, but now we fight wars also with dollars, and we have weaponized the dollar. We've essentially, again, not to get too much into the merits of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which my heart goes out for all the people in the Ukraine. But what we've essentially done is we've frozen the foreign currency reserves of another country, and that doesn't only have ramifications for Russia; it has ramifications for the rest of the world. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're a democracy, you're a despot, a Middle Eastern country, Southeast Asian country. I think a lot of people right now are rethinking this notion that they should be holding their country's reserves in dollars, right? Because they don't have control over the dollar. So you have countries that are rethinking that and looking for what should they be putting their reserve currency into. If it's not dollars, that's going to be a huge blow to the dollar. Is it gold? Is it Bitcoin? Is it some new international currency that's like ADRs, that's a basket of other currencies? But clearly, whatever the answer is, it's a move away from the dollar. And so while I think the dollar is going to win in the short run in terms of economic sanctions against Russia, I think in the long run, it's going to lose in terms of its purchasing power. We saw after the Suez Canal, debacle in the early 50s.
That's right.
When the pound one day was the world reserve currency, the British pound, the next day it wasn't. It lost 40% of its value overnight. I think the dollar's, in store for something similar.
That's just, I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of people don't realize that. When the Suez crisis started, the pound was a reserve currency.
Right.
And by the time it ended, Macmillan was the prime minister at the time, and he sent a 3-word message to Dwight Eisenhower, the words being "over to you."
Yeah,
because
exactly.
he knew exactly what you're saying. There's been a sea change.
And if you look at other currencies, nothing really jumps to the forefront, right? You're not going to replace the dollar with the euro. I mean, you have European countries bailing on the euro right now. The French elections next week, and the right side of the political spectrum is questioning France's place in the EU the way the Brits did. And so, do you really want to hang your hat on that currency? The Swiss franc is a great currency, but it's too small to be the world reserve currency.
Right.
The Russians and the Chinese would like their currency to play a larger role, and it probably will. But nobody trusts them to back the world reserve currency either. So, we're kind of, the Economist talked about a beauty contest between the ugliest women in the world. And I think that's where we are right now. We don't really have a clear forerunner in terms of paper currencies because none of them can be trusted. Politicians in every country print, and it saps the value of a nation's currency as it does that. So I think when we talk about Bretton III, that's what they're talking about, which is right. a reset of the world currencies. That commodities, gold, rare earths, and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, they're all going to play a role, or they're all going to be influential at the expense of fiat currencies. So again, I think for all the viewers, if you have all your money in any currency, any fiat currency, whether it's dollars, euros, pounds, whatever it is, you're not in a very safe position. And I fear that your standard of living is going to go down as we go forward. So I think right now you want to be looking to mirror what, if countries are going to do this at the macro level, then individuals would be smart to get out in front and do it at the individual household level. And that's really what I'm telling my clients. Look at these things. When the international world order says gold needs to play a role, silver needs to play a role, Bitcoin needs to play a role, all those things are just going to go up, 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 up.
There you go.
I just read something the other day about Bitcoin, about in the last 10 days or so, about $2.5 billion worth of Bitcoin have been purchased and taken offline, meaning they're no longer available to trade. These are investors buying them, putting them in cold storage for the future. And,
Wow.
Bitcoin is it only has a finite number that trades. So as you take away that supply, Bitcoin had dipped below 40,000 in the last few days. It's back up to about 42, but a lot of people think, it's going to be heading back to its all-time high of 68,000 and beyond. So
what was the all-time high, Joel?
A few months ago, it hit its all-time high of 68,000.
Wow.
It's been in the 60s briefly twice. It's been in the 50s for longer periods of time. And one of the analysis I just read thought the next sort of plateau would be 55, that it's going to go from where it is now to about 55. Of course, I'm not an investment advisor. This isn't financial advice, but I do think that if you're taking away supply and demand is steady or increasing as people look for alternatives away from fiat currencies, it's economics 101, that you take away supply, demand increases, the prices have to go up.
Right down that same pike here, right down that same alley, there was an article. I know you and I both read Zero Hedge, which is always very interesting. Every single day their newsletter is. And there was an article either yesterday or the day before by a guy named Sergei Glazyev. And he is a top Russian economist. Okay. I mean, wherever anybody is on the whole Russian-Ukraine thing, this guy's a serious economist. And his analysis, and it was pretty lengthy, was that the U.S. in their sanctions, the U.S., England, Great Britain, and France in their sanctions have overplayed their hand. And his feeling, and he's a top advisor to Putin and the others there, and international the Eurasia Economic Union. His feeling, Joel, is that they overplayed their hand, and it is going to end up doing what you were just saying, and eventually remove the dollar as reserve currency, because the other countries are no longer going to trust the U.S. and say, look, the U.S., it's almost like we've all had it happen where you have somebody who has a bad temper, right? And they throw a temper tantrum, and eventually you get to the point you say, you know what? I just want to be careful around this guy. And he says, that's what he's saying. This is happening in India, it's happening in China, throughout the world. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, just going back to the comment before where 70 years ago, the ball got handed off to us from the Brits. It was sort of our moment to be in the spotlight. And think about it. During the Cold War, during Vietnam, we've had disputes with other countries and people from around the world. But the political and even the military disputes were separate from our currency. Our currency was a unit of value that anybody could access, anybody could trade in. We wanted people to want our currency. Now we're saying, oh, for 70 years you wanted our currency, but now we have the ability to block you from using it, even though you've been acquiring it for 70 years to use however you wanted. There's never been any strings attached on how you used your dollars, but now there are. We've weaponized the dollar. We've said, if you don't do what we want, then we're going to make it so that you can't use our dollar. Well, that sort of strikes fear in the hearts of not only our enemies, but maybe even some of our friends. Some of our friends are saying, well, what if tomorrow the U.S. is mad at us? Are they going to turn us off? And so I think, because of the war, the dollar has strengthened. I think right now it's below 110. It's about $1.07, $1.08. It's at a several year high against the euro, but I think that that's going to change, and I think that particularly as the war subsides and people think about their long-term foreign policy and their economic policy, you're absolutely right. When you have Russia, China, and India, I mean, you're talking about basically half the world's population right there. When
Right.
they say we think we don't want dollars anymore, then what are they going to do with the dollars they have? They're going to dump those dollars and they're going to buy the things we were talking about. They're going to buy gold. They're going to buy silver. They're going to buy Bitcoin. They're going to buy gas and oil reserves, commodities. So, the dollar is going to be kind of left behind, or again, it's not going to go the way of the dodo bird. It's not going away, but it will be worth less in the future. And I think that's why, if you earn dollars, if you invest in dollars, all your investments are in dollars, you really need to be thinking about real diversification. Take some of your money, take some of your dollars out off the table, convert them into some of these other assets. Because I think in the future, they'll be worth a whole lot more dollars in the future than what they are now. So that's really my advice to any of my clients.
Oh, that's great advice. And in this gentleman's article, and he's right down the same thinking you are. He is saying, and this is where I may depart from it a little bit. He's saying that he thinks what's going to emerge from all this is an international digital currency. Have you heard talk of that? Or what's your read on that?
Well, there are countries that are trying to do their own digital currencies, I think, and there is an international currency already that like the World Bank and the IMF uses called ADRs. And so, yes, I could envision a global digital currency. The question is, what would back that currency? Because, I think there would be a lot of people that would hem and haw about putting all their faith in the UN or the IMF or the World Bank as well. But if it's backed by something, again, what is the something? Gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, maybe minerals, gas, oil, maybe real estate. There's got to be something real behind those types of cryptocurrencies to get buy-in. That's my opinion, but I don't disagree at all. I think, because of the action the U.S. has taken, I think it will hurt Russia in the short run, and might even help, to bring about an end to the war. But I think in the long run, people are just going to say, well, I don't want to put myself in that position where the U.S. government essentially controls the national reserves of our country, whatever country that is.
Yeah. I think last week we threatened India that if they didn't stop buying Russian oil, we were going to do sanctions against them. I think that the response of the Indian government was just exactly what you just said. Wait a second, we need to start stepping back from these people, and I think that's a real danger. What about I have two very serious business associates. I mean, deal in the international arena, who are working on their own asset-backed cryptocurrencies. What are you hearing in that respect, and what are you advising your clients about emerging cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, it's an interesting area. I think you really have to know what you're doing or be close to that industry. I know that just in the last few years, there've been literally thousands of new currencies have sprung to life, and I think just like startups, companies, some are going to win and you'll make a fortune, but some you're going to lose. So you have to decide what part of your portfolio you want to use for those types of speculative currencies. I think there's probably already a half dozen or even 10 well recognized cryptocurrencies that have sort of made that jump and are going to be around forever. If the dollar is the fiat world reserve currency, then Bitcoin is the crypto world reserve currency. Most other cryptocurrencies measure themselves in Bitcoin. So, Bitcoin's not going anywhere. Ethereum's not going anywhere. Solana, Cardano. I mean, these currencies are very widely circulated, very much sought after. They're used for savings and investing. Once you get through that, then you get to more speculative type coins and tokens. And so you have to ask yourself, what is it that is special or unique about these types of tokens and coins? They have to do something better, faster, cheaper, than the existing coins. And I think there will be some that emerge. One of the coins out there, for example, Utrust. It's based in Portugal. They've become sort of the interface between crypto and fiat, and I find that to be a very interesting space. They kind of want to be the PayPal of cryptocurrencies. And so the more and more currencies that I read about, you are saying, wow, this really could be the next best thing. But again, some are going to win, some are going to lose, and so I'm not really advocating any specific cryptocurrency, but I think as a class, it's something that most investors should think about having exposure to. I think only about, even the big ones like Bitcoin in the U.S., less than 10% of Americans have direct or indirect ownership of Bitcoin. So there's a long way to go, even for those big established ones.
So, and I think worldwide Bitcoin's at maybe 300 million out of 7 billion people. So it looks like it's still. I mean, they're the first movers, but we know also that Atari was the first mover. BlackBerry was the first mover.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of first movers who don't end up ruling the roost, and there are others who end up sharing with competitors as it moves on. The real quick question on so cryptocurrency is one you're telling your people to look at. How about with the Biden tax bill? I think he's proposing essentially eliminating 1031, right? So what do you tell your people when they come to you and say, Joel, if they eliminate 1031, is that a major hit on clients of your caliber, people who are major players in the financial arena?
Well, sure. I mean, real estate's always been a very sort of privileged sector. It's been that way purposefully because it's what encourages entrepreneurs to invest in housing stocks. And, if the government, instead of encouraging it, penalizes people, you'll see a major reduction in new supply, which is going to drive up housing. Again, I fear that many of these decisions that are taken by people who do not understand economics. If you interject trillions of dollars into the economy, that causes inflation. If you pay people to stay home, fewer people work. That causes shortages, and that also causes inflation. Inflation hurts people that earn the least amount of money. When you start talking about penalizing people who are in the real estate business, or taking away the advantages they have to develop new housing stock, that's going to push up housing for everyone. That's going to hurt the most are the people at the lowest end of the spectrum. So a lot of their decisions show that they really don't have a basic understanding of economics. Again, that's not exclusive to Democrats. I think there's plenty of Republicans that also do not really understand economics. But for all of his antics and for all of the things that people didn't like about somebody like Trump, he was a businessman and he understood those types of basic things. So, if first of all, I doubt there really will be any major changes. I think the chance to make those changes was last year. Now we're in election year. Most people think that the Republicans will take the House or the Senate or both. And, the chances of this kind of broad sweeping legislative change going through is probably not going to happen. But just touching back on Trump, obviously he made his money in real estate. He'd probably be the last person that would ever fiddle with, take away those types of incentives for entrepreneurs to build new housing stocks, which is really one of the things that the 1031 exchange is all about. You change from one property to another, so you can renovate it, fix it up, put it back on the market, change it again, change it again, change it again. If every time you do that, you have to pay income tax or even capital gains tax, the likelihood of you doing that is diminished. And
Yeah.
I think somebody like Trump understands that. So, but if the Republicans take the House or the Senate, that probably throws that out the window, at least for the next few years.
Yeah, Trump definitely understood it because he made a lot of his money that way. So he was, as you say, he was a businessman. So in one final point, you mentioned the elections. Are your clients at this point taking a wait and see attitude? Final question. Are they taking a wait and see attitude in view of the fact that we do have the pending elections in November and quite possibly major changes?
Yeah, it's interesting when you say wait and see. I think that nobody really anticipates any major legislative changes or any major legislative or tax changes because of the sort of political stalemate we have. But what I see is my clients are extremely active in how they're positioning their portfolios based on the things that we're talking about. They're looking for defensive. They're looking for alternative investments that are designed to protect them from the inflationary cycle that we're now in, right? I mean, cash, bonds, anything that, who in their right mind would want to buy a 30-year government treasury bond paying 2% interest? I mean, that's a guaranteed recipe to lose money. You're going to lose. I mean, as inflation goes up, you won't even keep up with 10% of the inflation by owning those. So you have to look at investments that really will keep up with or surpass inflation. I'm seeing, people going aggressively into corporates that they feel that can shine and do well in this environment. Also seeing them look at defensive things like metals, because when the inflation hits, generally metals will hold their own in terms of purchasing
Right.
power. So when when you say, are they, observing the status quo? Yes, they are, but that doesn't mean that they're not doing anything with their own money. And I think they're doing actually quite a lot to sort of actively combat the damage that's being done at the national level.
Great. Excellent. All right, Joel. This has been absolutely exactly what we needed to hear. Some great advice for folks. And again, I appreciate the fact that you're giving.
Sorry, it's not better news, but we have to take the world the way we find it and then deal with it from there.
Well, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. You play the ball where it lays, as they say in golf. So there we go.
That's a good analogy today.
Thank you very much.
Good being with you. See you next week.
This has been great. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.
Take care.
Excellent advice, folks. Excellent advice from America's #1 asset protection attorney. Same advice he's given his top clients that he was just talking about. So take advantage of it. Take advantage of it every week, and we'll be back.
You broke right at the end. Did you hear me? Okay.